Now we're going to call the meeting to order. Could everyone please rise for the flag salute? I
Pledge
Pledge
allegiance
allegiance
to the
to the
to the
flag
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 of
of
the
the
of the
United
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 States of
States
States of
America
America
and to
and
the
to the
republic
republic
Republic, for
for
which
which
it
it
stands,
stands,
one
one
under
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
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 liberty
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 and
and
and justice.
justice
justice
for
for
all.
all.
Thank you. Rule of egress. In the event of an emergency, all people may exit right or left from this room and proceed to an exit door. All doors will open from the inside. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the Heldon Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published in the North Jersey Herald News, the board's official newspaper, on January 12, 2020, and on August 14, 2020. It should be noted that notice of this remote access virtual meeting was published in the North Jersey Herald News on August 14, 2020. Notices of this meeting indicating date, time, and place were posted publicly on the door of the main entrance to the school and filed with the clerk in the municipality of Haledon. Roll call, please.
Miss Diaz, Mrs. Fisher,
Here.
Mrs. Ziza,
Here,
Mr. Jacques, Mr. Martinez, Mr. Moxo, Mrs. Perez,
Here.
Mr. Ramadan,
Yeah, here.
and Mr. Guzman.
Here. At this time, I would like to acknowledge Dr. Miguel Hernandez on his impending retirement on August 31st, 2020. We have a resolution, and I want to read it for the record, and I want to make a presentation to Dr. Hernandez on behalf of the board. Whereas Dr. Miguel Hernandez has been associated with the Haledon Public School District for the past 5 years, and whereas Dr. Hernandez held the top post of Superintendent of Schools from which he will officially retire on August 31st, 2020, and whereas Dr. Hernandez successfully implemented the Superintendent's Institute, the Tri-District Field Day, the Tri-District Music Festival, and administrative summer collaborations. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the members of the Haledon Public School District Board of Education, join unanimously our deep gratitude for Dr. Hernandez's leadership and to extend our best wishes for continued personal success far into the future for Dr. Miguel Hernandez. Doc, thank you so much. It's been a complete pleasure working with you. Can you come forward, please? Doc, on behalf of the board, we want to present you with this certificate to honor your career as superintendent and with the deepest appreciation for 5 years of outstanding service, commitment, and dedication to the schools and students, presented by the Board of Education and Administration of the Haledon Public School District. Thank you so much, Doc, and we salute you for your service. Doc, if you may say a couple words, please. I think they can't hear you, Doc.
Oh, Doc, you're
Doc,
muted.
you're muted.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Guzman, and thank you to all the board members and former board members for the opportunity to be a superintendent here. It was really a great honor to lead the school district and work with such wonderful administrators, teachers, and staff members. I will miss this place. It's been a great run. It's been, you know, very rewarding, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
At this time, if I may, I would like to open the floor for any of the board members that would like to say anything.
George, I'd like to say something to Dr. Hernandez.
Oh,
Okay, Mrs. Fisher.
I want to wish Dr. Hernandez the very best upon your retirement. When you were hired to be our shared superintendent, I knew you would be a great educational asset to our district for both Haledon and for Manchester. It's been my pleasure to work with you with both Haledon and Manchester, and you will be missed very much. You have shown us that in our community that shared services truly worked. Thank you so much, Doc, for everything that you've done.
Thank you.
Mrs. Diaz.
Thank you. I would like to express my gratitude as well for your service here, not only with Heldon Public School in Manchester, but also with the community. Thank you so much for your professionalism. You try to be very fair and you always listen to everyone. Um, and that active listening was really appreciated. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'd like to add to that that I think one of your strengths, Dr. Hernandez, was that you were always present. You know, you were always at events, you were always at the school, and that was appreciated. It was noticed and it was appreciated by, you know, parents and families. So thank you for that and for everything.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Ramadan.
Dr. Hernandez, thank you for your service and your dedication to our students and to the faculty and to the community. I've learned a lot, and you were always there and willing to help out in any way, shape, or form. So good luck on your retirement and enjoy it.
I will.
Is that you, Mr. BA? Okay, yeah, go ahead. No problem. Floor is
oh,
yours.
I was going to say, um, it's been my pleasure working with Dr. Hernandez for the past 5 years, and we've accomplished a lot together. And like I said, the nice thing is that we're in a better place now than I think we were 5 years ago. He's made Haledon a better place, and I appreciate him for that. So, congrats you on your retirement, and you've definitely earned it.
Doc, thank you so much. Um, on a personal note, I want to thank you for always being accessible. And I also want to thank you for working hard to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community. I think that was, to me, on a personal, I think that was something I was most impressed with you, Doc, in addition to your commitment to student achievement, to school safety. And words cannot adequately express um, the way you carried yourself, your professionalism, um, in addition to, like Angelique said, your fairness. Thank you so much, Doc. We appreciate you. The last thing, Doc, I want to thank you because when you submitted your uh, paperwork for retirement, you were due to retire at the end of the school year, and we had to fill your shoes and conduct a superintendent search jointly with the Manchester Regional High School Board of Education. And you agreed to stay on until now, until August, to the end of August, to allow for a smooth transition between you and whoever was to replace you. So thank you for your selfless act. We appreciate that as well. Um, at this time, we would like to recognize two staff members that are also retiring for their dedicated 24 years and 30 years respectively. Uh, Ms. Candice Komar, and Mrs. Angela Verena. Again, we thank them for their service to our school district. Dedicated service of 24 years and 30 years respectively. Ms. Komar and Ms. Verena, thank you so much, and we salute you as well. Um, do any board members have any comments for the aforementioned teachers who are retiring?
Mrs. Fisher.
Mrs. Fisher, go ahead.
Ellen, you're on mute.
Now?
Go
Okay,
ahead.
I'd like to extend my very best wishes on the retirement of Angie Verena and Candy Komar. I've known each educator from the first day they started here at Haledon Public School. Each of these ladies always gave 100% to the children and to the district. Thank you both again, and best wishes on your retirement. Thank you so much, and you guys were really great working with you, and I can't ask any more than that, but you really did a great job. Thank you so much again.
I'd like to add something. My kids, both of my kids were lucky enough to have both of those teachers, Mrs. Komar and Miss Farina, and it helped. They benefited for it. They were the better for it. Mrs. Komar was my son's fourth grade teacher, and she was so knowledgeable and so caring. It was a great year for him. And Miss Farina was a teacher in the room with my daughter for kindergarten, and she always talked about Miss Farina. So I feel sorry for the kids who won't get to have you as teachers, but I wish you the best in your retirement, both of you. Thank you so much for all of your years at HPS.
And I would like to share that both teachers cited in their retirement letters, their intent to retire, that they cited their fond memories here at the Heldon Public School, in addition to their connection with the community, and they really loved everyone they worked with and the students they served. So again, we congratulate them and we truly thank them so much. Awesome. At this time, I will turn the meeting over to Principal Chris Waka to discuss our COVID-19 plan.
Thank you, President Guzman. The restart plan that we created was based on the collective input from administration, from HA leadership, from board members, and input from parent groups is also taken into account. Basically, in order to restart, we first need to establish that we can fulfill all safety guidelines outlined by the state. With the data that we have received from surveys, we believe that at least 70% of parents will select remote-only options for their children. It's actually very possible that we will see greater than 70% of parents select remote-only learning for their students. Therefore, our restart will see about 3 or 4 students in a classroom wearing masks, being taught by teachers that are wearing masks and possibly even face shields. These students will have regular hand washing breaks. We'll use UV wands each day to sanitize high touch areas in the classrooms and around the buildings, and we will sanitize each room each day. Essentially, I believe that with such small class sizes and with so many precautions, we can safely open our building to provide educational services to the students whose parents need them to be here. I believe that the governor has put all districts in the state in a very difficult position. Just last week, it was announced that districts may go remote only if they have a reason to go remote only. I don't believe we have a valid reason to advocate for remote only. However, I do want to take a moment to discuss possible scenarios that would cause us to have to change our plans. The first scenario is if the governor decides that all schools must go remote only. If this happens, we would have to go remote only. I imagine the virus rates would likely catalyze this decision. The second scenario that would cause us to go remote only would be if we had a local outbreak of COVID-19. I keep in fairly regular touch with the town's health secretary, and our nurse, Ms. Carr, has been selected to be the town's health officer. I believe we will know very quickly what the local situation is regarding to the virus, and I believe we would be able to act very quickly based on the information we receive. The third scenario would be if we cannot fully staff the building. I know that the state has provided the Coronavirus Family Cares Act. If we have a high amount of staff that select this and are willing to receive only 2/3 of their salary for 10 weeks, then it could possibly put us in a position whereby we would have to go remote only. We have decided to offer childcare to teachers whose children are aged between pre-K and 8th grade. So I believe that this will reduce the amount of staff that may need to apply for the Coronavirus Family Cares Act. And since we are offering childcare to these staff members, we believe we are on firm legal footing should we wish to deny applications based on childcare needs. I'm hopeful that we do not reach that point. However, the board should be made aware that if enough staff members select the Family Cares Option Act, then it's possible but not certain that we would need to go remote only. The fourth scenario that would cause us to go remote only is if we see that all nearby districts have decided to go remote only. At that point, we would need to reassess if we would want to be the only school within a reasonable proximity to open with a hybridized system. The last scenario that would cause us to go remote only is if we have at least 2 positive cases from students or staff that have attended the HPS building. If we get 2 cases, then we would need to go remote only for at least 14 days. However, I imagine at that point we would likely look to go remote only for a more prolonged period of time. The difficult part of this whole planning is that there's not a clear metric that will show us what a truly safe learning environment would be. For staff and students to come back to a normal operation, would it take a vaccine? Would it take a transmission rate to be at a certain level? Would the virus have to be completely removed from the state? We just don't have this direction from the state. And because we lack this direction, we will continue to plan and operate, but do so in a state of limbo. Nonetheless, right now, with our class sizes being what we expect them to be, we can open safely. I know that the people in our community that want to send their children to school are doing so because they need this service from us. I believe that if we could safely open, then we should do so because we serve the needs of the children of this community, and this group of children need us to reopen, even in such a modified and hybridized way. With that said, I'd like to provide this board with as much information as possible. So I've asked our local health secretary, Victor Zlatanovich, to kind of give the board an update as far as the local picture for what coronavirus is doing in Halden. Pat, are we able to get Victor access?
Requested he unmute himself.
We just need you to unmute yourself, Victor. We'll give Victor about another minute, and then we'll move on if he can't get on. So Victor's saying he's unmuted from his end. Do we want to move on, George, and maybe at the end of the meeting we could have Victor give us his report if we could figure out the IT issue?
Sure. Vic, can you hear us? Okay. Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Walker? Mr. Walker, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what I like about this plan is that first and foremost, all stakeholders were consulted. That's very important, including our teachers. Um, so that was major. That that puts me really at ease with everything going on. The other thing is that we do have parents that want to send their children to school, and I know the majority of our parents do want to do remote learning. So I think the plan submitted accommodates everyone, including the child care for the teachers, the child care, so on and so forth. So that definitely helps. And as long as we have a continuity plan moving forward, if we do have to close and go remote only, and we're prepared for remote only again, um, I really feel comfortable with this, um, because when we went remote only initially back in March, that was really tough on our teachers. That was really tough on our parents, very especially tough on our students, to kind of get acclimated to that. So, are we working on anything on the remote learning end to kind of advance that, so we could make sure we provide the best education possible to our students with remote learning?
Yeah, I think that it's a very good point. So when we left on March 6th, we really didn't have a plan to prepare our staff or our students or the parents for remote learning. Now that's not the case. We've had time to prepare. So I've been able to meet with hundreds of parents via Zoom meetings with parents, and I'm going to do that again next week as well. But I got feedback from them. Fortunately, we had about 16 or 17 staff members who were generous enough to to volunteer to be part of the technology task force. One group is helping us, prepare teachers for what a Google Meet audio-visual instruction classroom will look like. Another group's working to prepare students. Another group's working to prepare students for what this will look like. I was able to send out a video. If you go to our Facebook page or our website, we have a video where I gave a brief demo lesson. But I think that the live synchronicity of the lessons are going to be a huge asset that we have this year that we did not have when we left in March. And that a child's going to be able to be home and be able to, through the camera and the webcam and the microphone, be able to see their teacher's lesson. I think our technology team and our IT team did a really good job helping us prepare for that. We have the cameras set up in a part of the classroom where you're not really going to see the 3 or 4 kids that are in. The viewer will see the teacher and hear the teacher. We're providing training so that this type of instruction can become stronger quicker. We know that we're going to hit a couple hiccups along the way because it's new for everyone. However, I believe that the quality of instruction is going to be much greater than it was. I believe that the student attendance is going to be much more promising than it was because now there's a set schedule for you to go on each time, each period of your day you're going to follow from home. So I'm pretty excited about where we're at, despite the fact that we're doing this because of the pandemic.
I have another question, and I think I spoke to you about this already. But one thing I was very concerned about was the special education. Obviously that's a topic that's near and dear to me. So what ends up happening is, obviously, I know for a fact that little Georgie at home, he's gonna get a better education if he has that one-to-one, um, versus virtual, right? So for those who don't know, I have my son who's 10 years old. He's autistic. Now I want to know if what are we doing about that as far as special education? Do we have anything in place for that? I want that to be shared with
Sure.
everyone.
So I've asked our special ed director, Ms. Martinez, to be available tonight to answer that specific question. So Pat, if we could turn the mic to her so she can give us the most factual and detailed answer.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. First, I want to echo everyone's sentiments for Dr. Hernandez's retirement. It's been a pleasure working with you, and thank you for the opportunity to be the Director of Special Services for both districts. With regard to Mr. Guzman's question, what we have done is which is on tonight's agenda as well, for our students with our more significant disabilities, we have purchased the Rethink Ed program. The Rethink Ed program is an online program where the teachers, it's specifically geared for our students with autism. However, our students with in our LLD classes can also access this program. There will be PD for the teachers that are teaching those classes come the first few days in September. probably either the second or the third. We're still finalizing that within our cabinet meetings. We've already spoken to the company. And what is going to happen, that is a really personalized program. So it will help not only the teachers who come into the 21st century with the technology, because what I have learned and what I have seen my past 2 years in district is we are still performing our discrete trial instruction using what is called program books. So it's more of an antiquated system. So I wanted to bring us into the new century, but also with this remote learning environment, the Rethink Ed program provides a lot of video tutorials for parents, because that's what the feedback my team and I have received throughout this closure is the parents, especially our parents in our ASD class and our newly formed MD class, which was formerly an ASD class, they're struggling at home because they don't have the expertise that our teaching staff does. So by implementing this program, it's going to have a lot of videos and a lot of tutorials for parents so that they can learn how to use a hand over hand or use prompting properly in order to bring their students to the next level. For our generalized, to not get into to make it more layman's terms for everyone to understand, for our generalized special education programs, which includes our in-class resource students, our pull-out resource students, which are a few new programs we are implementing for the 2021 school year, and our ILLD classes as well. The teachers will continue to use Google Classroom, within the classroom or remotely, based on the student's schedule. And the aides were trained throughout the closure. I got them training on Google Classroom on how to properly use that platform in order to support their students in a virtual environment. Because like Mr. Waka stated earlier, when we closed, it was something that was unpredictable. It was something that we initially anticipated would only be for a short amount of time. And as it's turned out, it hasn't. So I've been very proactive. My team and I, the administrative team collectively, we've been very proactive on getting training for our aides. And I use Google Classroom as a platform to communicate with all of the special ed teachers regularly. That is almost like an embedded PD that we have. So I have been posting resources regularly to give them additional resources that for them to use to facilitate their instruction. But as far as IEPs are concerned, we will continue to implement all of the students' goals and objectives as per their individualized IEPs. We have already collected data as to where all of our classified students were in March and again at the end of June via PLAFs, which are present levels of academic performance. And all of the students' case managers have that data. As students' IEP meetings come up, we will discuss what the services were and determine if any compensatory services are due. All of our related services have continued throughout the closure with the exception of our physical therapy. I think I mentioned this before, but just to reiterate in case anybody missed it or forgot, we only have 7 students in the district who receive physical therapy, and they are our students that have the more significant disabilities. So when speaking to the team and the physical therapist, it was determined that because physical therapy is such an area where it requires physical manipulation, all of those students received exercises that they could do at home. However, we are already aware that, and that is a contracted service, so that service ended as of the last day of instruction, in-person instruction. And once schools physically reopen, we will go through those students, determine their needs, and they will also be compensated on services. So as far as special ed is concerned, I am confident we have a solid plan. We will continue to address our students' needs. We will not be amending all of the IEPs per my attorney's advice. However, if parents request a reduction in services, those services are being documented to keep the district in compliance and also to make sure that the IEPs are reflective of the parents' wishes. Parents also, if they refuse a service right now, that does not mean that it's due to this environment. And then once we're back in traditional schooling, we will continue with the services as needed for each student's needs.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody have any other questions?
I actually have a question, Doc. What are the chances that we can do in person only for special education? Like if it came down to it, is that a possibility? Is that something that could be discussed?
Well, I'll start with the first part of that, and that
That,
the parents are still going to have the right to go remote only if they want. So,
yeah.
that's something where we're still a certain amount of parents may still opt for that, even if we can do that. However, I think we're just tomorrow morning at 11:30. I'm meeting with our guidance team, and we're going to go over how we're going to kind of structure our remote only selection process. We expect the window to open from the 20th till about, maybe 10 days afterwards. By then, we'll have a better understanding of exactly where we're at as far as how many people want this, remote only, but we expect it to be really, really high. And then what we can do is, let the kind of data dictate what answer that is, because, until I guess October 9th, I still want to start with that weekly A/B things. I want to start like we're starting with as basic and small of a restart as possible, which I think is a good thing. Um, Once we see how that plan works, we give it the time that we said we'd give it, then we could look into see, if it's going really, really well, then we could open up and say, listen, everyone that wants to come in, provided it's not going to be more than 12 in a class or something like that, we could open the doors for that. And we could open the doors for things like special education kids being there every day. However, if it is possible that with the size of the rooms that we can offer special ed kids in every day, then that's something we'd look to do.
Okay.
I have a
And
question.
that's, go ahead, Mrs. Diaz.
Miss Maribel Martinez. So this plan includes out of district students?
The out-of-district students will continue to follow the out-of-district schools plan. So we have students, and I don't have all my data in front of me, I could pull it up, but off of the top of my head, we have students at Washington South, Chapel Hill, and Windsor. Um, all of those schools right now have a hybrid option where, depending on the school, the students will go in 2 to 3 days a week and be hybrid the other days. So if they go in 3 days, they're hybrid the other two. Uh, so those students will follow that school's plan if the parent chooses to send them, because like Mr. Walker just said, it really is based on whether or not the parent chooses to send their children to school. We also did say, if we're reopening, that we do want that our self-contained classes to come in on a daily basis, again, based on whether or not the parent allows them. All of our self-contained rooms are under 12 students. So
Okay.
even if every single child chooses to come in, we are able to provide them that in-person instruction on a daily basis. Granted that those teachers do not put in for a leave. And if so, we would reschedule our schedule to, make that problem, to fix that problem. However, we are able to do that. And that is also going to be a form of compensatory education if we do, choose to do that. Because if all of the other students in the gen ed students in the class and the school are coming in on AB weeks and the special ed students come in every week, they are already getting that additional compensation. And then that will alleviate the need to provide those students additional compensation via an after school program or a before school program. However, I do want to say that our students in our autism class will likely still require and benefit from an after school program once we get to that point.
George, I think we have Victor. Victor, if you're here, can you kind of give us a quick local update?
Yes, hello?
We hear you.
Go ahead, Vic.
Oh, okay. All right, let me
Hold on,
just pull
just
up my
for the
notes.
record, Mr. Walker, can you just introduce Vic for the public again?
Victor Zlatanovic, I hope I pronounced it right. Victor is a local resident. He's also the Haledon's borough's health secretary, and he's a father of a HPS student.
Yes, thank you. So to date, we've had 349 residents who tested positive, 19 who have died. But in the past 2 weeks, we've had only 6 new cases. Some of the trends are in line with the rest of the county. One trend is the obvious that most of the newer cases are younger people. So, just want to, so among the 6 that we had, about half of them are people in their 20s or younger, and the average age between these 6 new cases is 36. The previous 2-week period, for comparison, we had 11 cases who by now have resolved, and about 80% of that were no older than 25. So during the pandemic, as a lot of people remember, the springtime, it hit mostly the elderly. Testing was obtained only for those with symptoms and who could get prescriptions. But with the summer rolling around, testing expanded to those without prescriptions. We were able to get a lot more diverse people to get tested. At the same time, we did have an intra-household spread. So there were a few families that where the virus jumped from an adult to possibly a younger person. So since the reopening began, the spread has continued among young adults. How we compare to other towns at this point, it's not entirely clear. It was a little bit easier to get access to other towns' data from CDRSS that was publicized by the county. The last few weeks, the state has moved over to a new software, and I don't have access to that, but I think that Elizabeth Clara, at least our contact tracers with the county do. But in any case, during the pandemic, we were in line with the rest of the county, more or less. You had a few outliers where you might have something where Wayne had a huge number of people, but most of them were residents in the long-term health care facilities. North Haley had a really high number of people who went out and got tested, but they had a very low positivity rate. And that might just go toward, that might be explained by the fact that a lot of them were maybe more likely to be retired or in jobs where they could work remotely. They have a little bit more space in North Haley compared to Haley and Patterson. Prospect Park had a very high positivity rate. So in any case, once a week, members of local health departments do a conference with the county health officer, Charlene Gungill, who is also Haledon's health officer by virtue of a contract with the county. And most towns participate except a few like Patterson and others. The consensus is that people do expect schools to go fully remote in the fall. The discussion about the August 13th guidance that was released, as far as that's concerned, towns and schools are still trying to figure that out. Like, for example, how to deploy rapid tests, where to get that. And I'll get to that, how that's going to apply to us, by the way. So just kind of for, as a reminder, some basic rules of the road. The virus has a 2-week incubation period. Asymptomatic people can spread it. The viral load can still be very heavy in the first 2 days, even without symptoms. There is a difference between droplets and aerosols. That was a big problem where the World Health Organization was late in the game to acknowledge that this thing can spread through the air through droplets or aerosols. And What I mean by that is that droplets are what you expel when you sneeze or cough, but aerosols are those that form from the point at time when droplets evaporate faster than they fall to the ground. So if the droplets fall to the ground, the nuclei will fall with it. But if the droplets start evaporating in the air, genetic material from the virus will still linger. So, this is why you might have heard back in March or April that this thing could linger in the air for up to 3 hours. And they say up to 3 hours because that was as long as the study took. Whether it could linger past that, we'll know probably a year from now. The 6 feet distance, it's still important to wear those masks. If you have face shields, that would be great. A sneeze can jettison material over 20 feet from the nose. So it has a lot of power there. So that said, at this point, people know about what the symptoms to look for, fever, shortness of breath, coughing, that sort of thing. Now, this thing can really, it's an upper respiratory infection. It'll make its way to the lungs and heart. It's attracted to receptors in the heart cells. That's why it'll attack the heart. With the lungs, it'll start working. It'll start ruining the lungs even before anyone develops symptoms. And pulse oximeters, the things that they'll attach to your finger when you're hospitalized, that'll check your oxygen levels. They've noticed that oxygen levels will drop well before anyone develops shortness of breath. Only when you develop shortness of breath, that's because you've run out of air in your lungs, and the lungs are working extra hard. So now with that said, I think where staff and students develop symptoms, this is where we'd have to identify rapid testing resources. Luckily for us, we have Elizabeth Carr, who's also the borough nurse and the school nurse, and she'd work with Sandy Cameron and Charlene Gungill at the county to obtain those rapid tests. I don't know how quickly we can start, get those together. The logistics will have to still be worked out. At the same time, people should be identified, who live in those households. So let's say you have a teacher who lives with, has a husband, a couple of kids, that would have to be identified by people. Now, as you know, a lot of teachers live outside of Haledon, so there's going to be a lot of other, there's going to be a lot of moving parts here. So even before the August 13th guidance, the general rule of thumb was that people were advised to stay home if they've been in close contact with someone for 14 days who tested positive, or at least 7 days after onset of their own symptoms, plus 3 days after symptoms ended. And that's just where you don't even have an actual test of that person. Where a person does test positive, I think if there's an adult who tests positive, contact tracers will contact that person and find out about any children in the household. So if, let's say, it turns out that there's a Haledon adult who tests positive, contact tracers should identify whether there are any kids in the household. If those kids turn out to be enrolled in Haledon Public, we can try to work our way backwards there and figure things out. Whether the kid came into close contact with someone else at the school and brought it home to their parents, or vice versa, where there's a risk where the child may be an asymptomatic carrier from the parents and then is now carrying it to school. If a child does test positive, same thing, contact tracing will have to kick in. So while this is happening, Elizabeth Carr, we'll get a lot more information about those positive cases as far as residents are concerned. If teachers who are not residents, we should be able to get that information. There's definitely an uptick in the county. Statewide, the transmission rate is now 1.03, which means that for every 100 infected people who've tested, they're going to get another 103 people infected. Now, on top of that, to make things worse, is that for every confirmed case, there could be anywhere between 6 to 24 infected people who have not tested in the community. So, in any case, by comparison, 2 weeks ago, the transmission rate was way higher. Northern New Jersey wasn't as high as Southern New Jersey. Southern New Jersey looks pretty bad. It might be a combination of being close to urban areas like Philadelphia. Delaware was getting hit pretty hard before New Jersey saw an uptick in transmission. And then on top of that, you have the bars and the beaches being reopened. So now contact tracing is not the BN and end all. And if someone does get that call, they really should cooperate. Unfortunately, around a little over 60% of people are getting reached. It's not 100%. And almost half of those called refuse to provide any contact information to contact tracers. So it's going to be a little tricky. It's definitely going to be a little tricky. We're going to make a lot of big assumptions along the way. So I think that's why the state came up with this guidance. If you have as few as 2 cases, consider shutting down. Now, everybody knows about the risks of going fully remote. You have the food insecurity, there's social isolation, learning loss, but on the flip side, the risks for the hybrid model, you have to kind of, Principal Walk has already discussed this. I'm not going to, bring it up. I totally agree with his position. He and I, we've talked about this, especially, including how this can affect teachers. One thing we need to keep in mind is that, there's other diseases out there that have very similar symptoms. The flu is one of them. I mean, coughing from the flu versus coughing from COVID, it's going to be a little tricky to distinguish that. And, flu season starts, is right around the corner in October. Usually starts out with sporadic cases. Last year was in the north, spread south, and then it peaked, and then it was statewide late December. And by the first week of February, there was a really high school absenteeism rate statewide. So there's that. And, the other conditions, and, people can Google this. You have the multiple system inflammatory syndrome. I'm sorry, I'm butchering this. I'm not a doctor, but the acronym is MIS-C. That's the thing where people have described it as Kawasaki-like, a Kawasaki-like disease. Kawasaki disease, by the way, is a rare condition, but it's however the leading cause of acquired pediatric heart disease. So you got to watch out for these things because they'll have very similar symptoms. And it's going to be real tough because with the weather cooling off, people are going to spend a lot more time indoors, and it's going to be a petri dish. This is how the flu and COVID spread. And I wouldn't bet on waiting for a vaccine. I think it's going to, when you take into account how long it takes to complete phase 3 trials in the U.S., then the research and then the results being analyzed and mass production of the vaccines themselves, assuming you have all the ingredients, and then rolling it out first to vulnerable populations, I wouldn't expect the vaccine to be ready until at the very, very earliest springtime. And even then, how many people are going to get it? So I think this is going to be the new normal for a very long time. I agree, still keeping a hybrid model in place to accommodate those few kids where, especially those kids of essential workers, because otherwise they'll either have to take time off from work as doctors or nurses or cops or firefighters, or they're going to put kids in daycares, in which case it doesn't really solve the problem. Kids are still going to be exposed to something. I'm just going to wrap up very, very quick, real. One thing, I just want a word of advice. I know that there's been talk about, everyone's aware of the state advisory list. There's around 36 states or so that are on it. Delaware seems to keep returning to it. If you visited any one of these states, people are advised to stay home for 2 weeks. I would also take into account foreign travel. Up until recently, the entire world was subject to the CDC's global pandemic notice. They've now stepped back a little bit. So if you went to places like, I think the Bahamas and Mariana Islands, you might be okay. But still, the vast majority of countries are still subject to restrictions. So especially for those who are not U.S. citizens, plan accordingly because you might have trouble coming back into the U.S. Wrapping up, I just want everybody to visit the Haledon Borough's website. We do put up information periodically, and it's not the most user-friendly website out there, but if you go to on the left-hand margin, there's a COVID-19 click here for updates. You go there, and you're going to see a list of documents that you pick from. There's a variety of stuff, but I make sure that it's updated, certainly with our mobile testing sites. So I just want to let everybody know that Elizabeth Carr will be organizing an event. I'm sorry. We're going to have 2 events in Haledon, okay? One is August 28th, and the other one is September 2nd. So one will be organized by Elizabeth Carr, and the other one is organized by the County Health Department, which has, they did away with the William Patterson testing site in favor of these mobile testing units that will travel around the county to different towns. And so there is that option to visit one of those 2 sites in Haledon or any one of the other mobile testing sites that take place in Passaic County, and they are open to county residents, so make sure you bring your IDs. If you are a out-of-county resident, but if you are a teacher or a cop, they should still be able to service you. And then finally, the other thing is, in addition to that, the County Health Department does offer saliva tests at home. They have these at-home saliva tests that will be mailed to you. They'll be FedExed to you. You get them, and you go online, and there's going to be a nurse who's going to walk you through the steps, right? You take a sample, and you put it in a package, and you FedEx it back to the county. Now, in order to request one, you have to go to the County Health Department's website, and you have to upload a copy of your driver's license to prove county residency, okay? So that's pretty much all I have. I know that was a lot of information, but there's going to be a lot of moving parts, and hopefully it'll work out. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. You've been a very important asset to us the last few months. So I appreciate all the time you've devoted to me and educating me and helping us with our plan. So thank you, Victor.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Victor.
Vic, we'd like to thank you. Victor is also an attorney, for those that don't know. I work closely with Vic on a daily basis in my capacity of what I do for a living. And he's been a tremendous asset to the Borough of Haledon, to the Haledon Board of Health, and also working closely with the Passaic County Board of Health as well. Vic, as always, thank you for a detailed report.
Thanks. Welcome.
Mr. Guzman, can I make a comment?
Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Isa.
So, after hearing what Victor just said, it paints like a pretty grim picture, but I think it's important to go back to what Mr. Walker was saying about the data that we've received via the surveys. It's expected that we're going to have a low number of students in the classroom, really low. And in addition, they're going to be socially distanced and they're going to be wearing masks. So I think what's important about our restart plan right now is that, families have a choice. If you want to keep your child home, you can keep him or her home. And if you want or need to send your child to school, you have that choice as well. And there's going to be low number of students socially distanced wearing masks. So I think that that's a solid plan, and those things are important to remember. Also, the fact that teachers will be provided with childcare is really important, because teachers are the other really big group in the building. It's students and teachers, and we have to address their concerns too. So I think that's important, and I imagine that that will help alleviate issues or problems that they may have, especially teachers with kids in school. So I just wanted to you know point that out, to note that the importance of that choice for families. And it could change, based on the scenarios that have been described. But if we can move forward with giving families a choice, I think that would be best.
Thank you, Ms. Cisa. Um, Mr. Walker, I have another question. This has been raised a couple times as far as our plan calls for 1 week in school, the next week remote, correct?
Yes.
With the data we've been collecting, as far as from your Zoom meetings and from your surveys, do you feel that it's possible, if it's permissible, with the guidance we got from the state, to do, let's say, I don't know, 80% of our students do remote. The other 20%, is it possible to have them in school every day?
So I
Is
want to.
that on the table?
Yeah, I completely understand that. I want to get there in our phase two start. I want to. This is as gradual an opening as we could possibly do, and we have it till October 9th. So we have about 4 weeks to see, how things go. If things go well, then I see no reason why phase two wouldn't allow that option.
Okay.
I think it'd be a very reasonable option. If we see that phase one doesn't have the progress that we like, or if local other districts around the state are having negative experiences with their restart, then we'd probably look to go the other direction or stay where we're at. But what we're approving tonight is phase one, and I'm hopeful that if things go as well as they should, if we all adhere to wearing the masks and wearing the face shields and doing the cleanings we say we're going to do, then we should be able to get to that point with phase two.
Now, and I'll be remiss if I didn't just put this out there, and that's, I know a lot of parents have an issue with even the whole logic of, how is my child going to have a mask on throughout the whole entire school day? How are we looking with that? How are we addressing that?
So, yeah,
Have we
so
spoken about that?
unfortunately, we're going to do this as kindly as possible. However, unless a child has some kind of medical issue whereby they, wearing a mask would actually be counterintuitive to their health, unless that happens, if a child's not able to wear a mask, the first time will be a warning, but the second time is going to be, one of us administratively calling mom and say, listen, now we're going to have to mandate, remote only. So it's one of those things where, we're going to hate doing that if we have to. However, for the safety of the staff and for the safety of the other kids in the room, unless you're eating lunch, then you're going to have to wear these masks. We know that this is going to be a much harder thing for our younger folks. Um, but I think, it's one of those things where we have to prioritize what's the safest for everyone. So unless there's some kind of doctor's note saying, there's an exemption from a mask, then we're going to have to, ask that they keep it on. We're going to look to kind of encourage, we're going to look to provide masks. If a kid spills something in his mask, we have 8,000 other ones in the building to give them. But it's the kind of thing where we're asking the parents to have really serious conversations with their kids saying, this is something you're going to have to do. And, if you continually don't do it, then the school's going to have to make a decision.
Understood. Any board members have any other questions regarding the COVID-19 plan? Okay, the public, if you have any questions, obviously we're going to have a public portion, and that will be our opportunity to ask any questions of Mr. Waka, the administration, or the Board of Education as it pertains to the COVID-19 plan or any other matter. Do we have a motion to approve prior minutes? I'm
So
sorry. Do
moved.
we have a motion to accept correspondence?
So moved.
Moved by moved by Ms. Diaz, second by Mr. Ramadan, and roll call.
Miss Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher. She say yes? I didn't hear
Yes.
her. Okay. Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez. Okay. Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Ramadan,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Do we have a motion to approve prior minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Ramadan, second by Mr. Martinez. Roll call, please.
Miss Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes on all, abstain on the 30th of July.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Ramadan,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Do we have a motion to open up the public portion to hear citizens on agenda items only?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Diaz, second by Ms. Perez, and roll call.
Miss Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez, Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Ramadan,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Okay. At this time, anyone who wishes to address the Board of Education, which does include the COVID-19 restart plan, that's on the agenda tonight for approval. Um, so any questions you may have, now is definitely your time. We'll
I
give it
forwarded,
several minutes.
I forwarded you questions, Mr. Guzman.
Yes, very good, thank you. And I have one as well that was sent to me. Give me 1 second. Okay. First, I have a question from Rachel. How many parents filled out the survey that showed only 30% of students will be in person?
So if you look on our Facebook site, you'll see I actually posted screenshots of the survey. But we had roughly over 300 and something participants in the most recent survey, so I thank the parents for that. We had about 62.5, I'm just going off the top of my head, percent that showed they want to do remote only. But if you look at the number of kids that each of the survey fillers had, we had over 100 of the people that said they wanted to restart. That they had more than one kid at HPS. Some of them had more than two children at HPS. So if you got to figure if we have 1,000 kids to get about 300 parents that participated, it's a fairly reliable set of data. We're going to know exactly by the end of next week. Tomorrow is when I'm going to explain to the community how we're going to go about our remote only selection process. We're working with our guidance team to set that up. We're going to get that out tomorrow. But with that data that we have so far, it looks strong that this is where we're at. And there's also about 19% of the people that responded said they're not sure yet. And I just know anecdotally from emails and things on Facebook that I'm getting from parents, and that many parents are saying to me, in fact, each day I get this a handful of times that I didn't fill out the survey, but I want to start remote only. So that's kind of where I'm getting that numbers at.
Thank you. At this time, I want to turn the floor over to one of our teachers, Ms. Cartena.
Hi, how are you?
We're good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good.
It's all yours. Go ahead.
Thank you. First, on behalf of the Health and Education Association, I want to wish Dr. Hernandez a long and healthy retirement. I have had the opportunity to work with Dr. Hernandez many times over the years in my role as a negotiator and now union president, and can honestly say there was never a time he didn't welcome me into a meeting with a smile. Even when our relationship needed to be adversarial, professionalism never wavered. Dr. Hernandez, you have mentioned to me your desire to travel. I hope the sun follows you to each new destination and you always enjoy the journey. We will miss you. I also rise tonight to share with the board the concerns Haledon teachers have regarding the reopening of school. As I'm sure you're aware, and Guzman mentioned before, myself, President Amanda Kuchelowski, and several other staff members were asked to participate in both the pandemic response team and the restart team. We were grateful to be a part of the conversation and work diligently using the rules established by the state. At that time, with the understanding that some degree of in-person instruction must be included in each district's plan, we tried to create the safest environment possible for students and staff. I remember in one meeting a clear discussion. Opening the school posed some degree of risk. Our job as a committee was to mitigate that risk as much as possible. The rules now have changed. Today, the opportunity exists for the board to not just mitigate the risk of illness to students and staff, but to eliminate it completely by closing the school to in-person instruction for the start of the 2020-2021 school year. Starting the year with remote learning provides us all with the gift of time and knowledge. Time for students and teachers to develop new class communities on equal footing. Time to evaluate the virus's spread in New Jersey. And time to understand that which seems to defy common sense, how housing a few hundred people in a school is any different than any other building in the state, which by current mandate can now only hold 25 people. Haledon School will likely have 35 to 50 people a day just in the pre-K kindergarten wing. We need time to understand how indoor dining is banned, but feeding kids in a school is safe. Time to evaluate the building's HVAC system. Time to develop a plan to ensure safety during fire drills, lockdowns, and evacuation drills. Finally, a practical point to keep in mind. I'm sure you are aware that many districts in New Jersey have already decided to begin the year remotely. In response, our teachers will reluctantly need to avail themselves of paid family leave offered by the federal government under the Coronavirus Response Act. To date, 7 teachers are planning to request this leave and 11 more are considering it. Add to this what will be the new reality. When a teacher doesn't feel well, they will and stay. I'd ask you to consider the risk of bringing multiple substitutes into our building. Again, we'd like to acknowledge the work done by the board, school administration, the pandemic response team, and the restart team. We are particularly encouraged by purchases of PPE, UV wands, and temperature checkpoints. These measures are a great start, and the HEA is committed to continue to work with the relevant stakeholders to make our school even safer. However, for now, we ask that you amend the district's plan to reflect that phase 1 consists of completely virtual instruction. This summer hasn't been easy for any of us. And board members, honestly, we appreciate that this decision isn't easy for you. The state and the governor have now put the power in your hands. We urge you tonight to do everything possible to keep people safe. I thank you for your time.
George, you're muted.
Ms. Cartana, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we definitely want to thank the Haledon Education Association for working with the administration and helping us develop a plan that that helps everyone and most importantly keeps our students safe. Right. We definitely want to take what you're saying into consideration.
Yes, and we're definitely willing to continue to work on this. I understand.
Understood.
You know, Mr. Waka has mentioned several times, the phase 1 is only till October 9th. It's not forever. So
Okay.
these are the important things that we'd like to keep in touch.
Okay. With that being said, this is what I want to do. Before I address this, I know we have an executive session tonight. right? So we can make some discussion there because there may be some personnel questions and things of that nature. Okay, and I don't want to jump the gun. I know that our COVID-19 plan is on the agenda tonight. So I want to discuss with the board to see if perhaps we can table that discussion. Maybe perhaps we can even call for a special meeting, even if it's remote. Maybe perhaps sometime next week where we can kind of make a final decision on it. Gives us a little bit more time because this thing is so fluid. Things are constantly changing. So just taking into what you're bringing to our attention today, I want to give the board a chance to really digest this and not vote tonight on this COVID-19 plan. I want to definitely take what the Health and Education Association is bringing to our attention, so we can digest this and discuss this and allow the administration to vet this, and then we can make a final decision. So I'm definitely for tabling this COVID-19 restart plan tonight and calling for a special meeting. Um, And before I ask the board members how they feel about that, and I also want to discuss this in executive session as well. Like I said, I want to see if there's any other questions of the public, from the public rather. Mr. Pagani, any other questions? And I also want to note too that I've noticed that the state union as well has been pushing for remote only. And as a union member myself, on a personal note, I completely understand. I get it. So, like I said before, we want to um, speak to my fellow board members to see if we can call for a special meeting to vote on the COVID-19 restart plan, taking into consideration what the Health and Education Association has brought to our attention here tonight. And Ms. Cartano, we thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. Do we have a motion to close the public portion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Ramadan, second by Ms. Diaz, and roll call.
Ms. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jaquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez, Mr. Ramadan,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Give me a minute. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for September 8th. Um, would it be appropriate this time to Mr. BA and the council to discuss a possible special meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. At this time, we'll open the floor to fellow board members. How do we feel about the next regular meeting isn't until September 8th? So in consultation with the administration um, and the RBA, because I'm not sure what's going to be the first day of school that we were looking at, Mr.
So the
Walker.
September 8th is when we're scheduled to have kids return. Is that what you're asking?
Correct.
Yeah.
So we obviously can't wait till then to make a decision, right? So can we agree that we should call for a special meeting, or we would like to vote on this tonight? My personal position is that we should call for a special meeting. But if anyone has any comments, concerns, or willing to vote on this tonight,
George,
we can
could
entertain
the
that as well.
special meeting be next week? Because, September 8th is approaching fast.
Correct.
So it does give us a little time
A
to
little
think
time.
about it, but we don't want to push it off too much.
Correct.
Yeah, I would be in favor of having a special meeting next week.
Anyone else? Okay. Diaz? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So, Mr. Walker, what do you think about a meeting next week?
I'm more than happy to have a meeting tonight. I think it might be wise to still talk executively. However, I do think I'm here, so I'll meet whenever.
Okay.
Um,
Go ahead, Mr. Martinez.
I guess once we go into executive, if for some reason we come to an agreement, then maybe we can make the vote tonight. But if not, then we can have a meeting next week.
Okay.
I guess it all depends on what happens.
Very good. Okay, so with that being said, we will go into executive. Like I said, there might be some personnel matters being discussed. So with that being said, we'll go into executive to discuss COVID-19 in addition to personnel. Action may be taken. And we might, if we do not come to an agreement tonight, we'll table it for the COVID-19 restart plan for a special meeting next week. Very good. Moving on, President's report. I think we've discussed pretty much everything. I just want to just thank Dr. Hernandez for his 5 years of dedicated service to our district. I want to thank our two teachers that are retiring, which there's a resolution on the agenda to accept their retirements. And I want to just wish everyone a safe school year. And no matter what decision is made, this is a very tough decision for us because we have to take into account everything: safety, student achievement, parents who sometimes they have to leave their kids at home alone. And I understand we're not a babysitting service. I get that. I get that completely. However, we do know that remote learning is not the same as in person. So if we can safely do it in person, then I'm not the type of person to just say um, kind of just throw a rock and hide my hand. No, I'm gonna be open with everyone. It's my personal opinion. I don't know how the rest of the board. I'm not speaking on behalf of the board. I'm speaking on behalf of myself. So the teachers union, you know where I stand. Parents, you know where I stand. My fellow board members, administration, everyone. In person is not the same as remote. We already know that. However, we know that safety is a top priority. If we can safely educate our children, then I'm all for safely educating our children. Um, if we can't, then we will opt for remote only. Special education is another issue. We know that it's an issue because we know that a student with autism is not going to be able to learn remotely as much as they will in person. We know that already. We understand that there's a lot to this, such as, like I said, our parents that perhaps there's two essential workers at home, the students home alone. There's no one to really assist them with the remote learning, technology issues, just so many things going on here, and we're trying to accommodate everyone. So please bear with us. And with that, so with that being said, that concludes my report. And just know that, for the record, Mr. BA, we have everyone's best interest, especially our children, in mind. Just rest assured on that. Dr. Hernandez, for your final report. Doctor, muted.
Good evening. The PTA successfully concluded their Tricky Tray eBay auction last week. Sadly, our traditional Tricky Tray was canceled due to COVID-19. However, the PTA was able to salvage the event through this virtual auction. In all, the PTA gained over $6,000 through this innovative project. We thank all the community members that bid on items, and we thank all the vendors whose donations made this possible. And as always, we continue to thank the PTA for their leadership and for volunteering their time to make this event possible, and also for supporting the students at Heldon Public School. Mr. Waka and the administrative team held Zoom meetings with grade level groupings of parents and staff 2 weeks ago to discuss all matters related to school restart. Next week, we will once again set up another round of these virtual meetings with staff and parent groups. We finally received copies of the 2019-2020 yearbooks. Mr. Quayle is working on a plan to distribute the yearbooks to all those students who purchased them. Overall, the quality of the yearbook is very high, and we thank Ms. Bracy for her work with this project. Our custodial staff continues to work hard at preparing our building for the upcoming school year. Obviously, the layout of the classrooms and hallways is much different than it has been in the past due to COVID. We appreciate all the efforts that have been made to help us prepare our school for the upcoming school year. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Hernandez. Moving on to our business administrator, Mr. John Serapiglio.
All right, good evening, everybody. Just wanted to go over some of the items on the agenda tonight. Um, the first one is in regards to the correspondence. I don't know if we got to touch on this. It was something that was added, I believe, either yesterday or today. It was in regards to a letter, which was a review of our ESSA and IDEA grants. At our next board meeting, well, not maybe not our next one, but our one in September, we will have a discussion, a further discussion on this in regards to the review, as well as a corrective action plan in regards to some of the findings from that report. On the agenda tonight, we have several resolutions that I wanted to touch on. We're looking to approve access for the police to our security cameras like we have in years past. We are looking to approve Altica. This is to potentially allow for our some of our staff for remote calling, specifically our child study teams and our office staff. We had on the addendum tonight, and it was something that an email that we had sent out to the board. It didn't actually make it to the agenda when we sat down, but it is on there right now, which is the magic of board docs and technology. It's motion 13.20, which was referenced by our health department when he was giving his presentation to have Bergen New Bridge Medical Center set up in our parking lot on August 28th to perform COVID-19 testing. So we're looking to have that approved. What else do we have here? We have some other resolutions. We are looking to approve the hiring of a custodian. This would be an additional custodian for the 2020-21 school year from the count that we had for the 1920 school year. We would be looking to utilize our CARES money. Again, with the restart plan that we had put into place, there was a need for additional cleaning services by our custodial staff. We are also looking to once again approve our district to serve as a CEP, community eligible provision, by which means that every student is eligible for free breakfast and free lunch. In regards to the restart plan, which obviously could be potentially amended further, we have been working on making further purchases of cleaning products. We've been actually put together cleaning procedures and a cleaning schedule that was modified by myself and our custodial staff. We shared it with Mr. Waka. We are going to be sharing it with the board shortly. And that's the end of my report, unless anyone has any questions. Oh, and I apologize. One other thing. This is usually something that I hand around in regards to New Jersey School Board's virtual workshop, which is going to be obviously be virtual from October 20th to the 22nd. If any board members are interested in signing up for that, please let me know. Like I said, I normally would give this around, but given COVID-19, it's not good to share paper like that. But if you are interested in attending, we do need to sign you guys up for it. If you go, we can do I think this email has gone around to the board, but if not, I could have it be sent out again. That maybe we'll touch on a little bit in regards to how, at least conceptually, the school boards is going to work This is the one that we normally go down to Atlantic City in October. Obviously, due to COVID, we aren't going to be able to do that this year. So again, it's October 20th to the 22nd. It's a good spot to get some training in, obviously, to hit those requirements for board members, but it's also good to hear some other presentations about everything from vendors to other school districts and what they are doing. So.
Thank you, Mr. BA. Moving on to personnel and management, Ms. Diaz.
Have agenda items, and in addition, we met today to discuss new hire. And we also have, well, we have here in the agenda letters of resignations and basically new hires. So that's all we have for today.
Finance and physical plan, Mr. Ramadan.
We just met today, discussed bills and agenda items only.
Curriculum and technology, Mrs. Issa.
Agenda items only.
Policy, Mrs. Perez. You're muted. Oh, just put your mic.
Oh, sorry. So
No
we
problem.
met briefly before this meeting and agenda items only.
Thank you. Security and safety, Mrs. Fisher.
Yes, agenda items, and if we're going to table that one item regarding the COVID restart program, I think that's what we're going to discuss.
Okay, Mrs. Fisher, you're going to be a part of the executive session tonight?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Yeah, yeah, obviously remote. Community engagement, Mr. Moxo. I'm sorry, Miss Diaz.
No, nothing to report.
Stay in county, Miss Diaz.
I don't have anything to report.
Mrs. Fisher.
No, nothing at this time.
Counselor, anything? You're muted. Still muted. No. No. What do you have? August 15th.
Yeah, that's in personnel.
Item, as per our board attorney, item 815 on personnel and management is the contract approving Mr. Walker's contract, which was approved by the county superintendent. Thank you, sir. Before we move on to the agenda, personnel and management, I just want to formally again acknowledge Mrs. Candace Komar and Mrs. Angela Marina. Mrs. Candace Komar, teacher in the Heldon Public School District since 1996. Mrs. Angela Marina, teacher in the Heldon Public School District since 1990. They're both retiring on September 1st, 2020. Years of dedicated service, discharged their classroom duties effectively, have volunteered many hours of personal time in service to the school family, and in doing so has endeared themselves to students, parents, and colleagues alike. The Eldon Board of Education hereby publicly acknowledges both of them for their dedicated service, and we extend our sincere appreciation for their contributions to the entire school community. Personnel and management.
I'm going to move items 1 through 16, and that it's including the addendums that we have.
We have a second.
Okay.
Second by Mr. Ramadan. And roll call, please.
Ms. Diaz?
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Isa?
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Ramadan,
Yes.
Mr. Guzman.
For a vote, item number 15 is the formal approval of Mr. Chris Walker as the Chief School Administrator. He will be acting in the capacity of our principal slash superintendent. That will be effective September 1st, 2020. Um, and I'm going to read this for the record, which is the letter from the county superintendent addressed to our business administrator, Mr. John Serapiglia, and it says the following. I have reviewed the employment contract for Mr. Christopher Waka, Chief School Administrator, Principal slash Superintendent, in accordance with New Jersey state law to determine compliance with the standards adopted by the Commissioner of Education. Based upon my review, I have determined that those provisions of the contract subject to my review are in compliance with applicable laws and regulations. Therefore, I approve the contract for a period commencing on September 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2025. If there are any changes to the terms of this contract, you will need to submit it to the Executive County Superintendent for review and approval prior to the required public notice and hearings of such changes. Please be reminded that the contract for this position must be submitted annually to the Executive County Superintendent for review and approval. Sincerely, Mr. Carlos Rodriguez, Interim Executive County Superintendent. My vote is yes, and I congratulate Mr. Chris Baca on becoming the superintendent and succeeding Dr. Miguel Hernandez. And on behalf of the Health and Board of Education, we're confident that you will fill Dr. Hernandez's shoes, and you will do a great job, especially leading our district through COVID-19. Congratulations. My vote is yes. Moving on to policy. So I'm sorry, curriculum and technology.
I move item number 9.1.
Second.
Second.
By Ms. Aziza, second by Ms. Diaz and Mrs. Perez, and roll call.
Ms. Diaz, Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Ziza,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Ramadan,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Moving on to policy.
I'd like to move agenda items 10.1 and 10.2.
Second.
And roll call.
Ms. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Ziza,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Ramadan,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. For security reasons, I do not want to, and it says it right on the agenda, is executive content for security and safety. As far as an emergency site evacuation, I just have a question for the administration. It says here, no cost. How did that change? Where did that come from? Is that a typo?
Doc, you want to take that? I didn't put that on there.
Is that like a thank you, Doc, for your service, or? It should be a cost. Mr. BA, should we vote on it and then you can look at, or?
Well, like I said, I'm going in through the. I got to see which sites that they're referencing in here because I don't have it. I didn't log in. But yeah, maybe we should just pull 11.1.
Yeah, let's table it.
We should obviously table 11.2 as well.
So,
All right. Mrs. Fisher, why don't you take it from there? I'm sorry.
okay, at this time, I'm going to move 11.3, being that 1 and 2 are now being tabled.
Second.
Oh, there's an 11.4. Sorry, I had to add that. 11.4.
Correct. Okay. Moved by Mrs. Fisher, second by Ms. Diaz. Roll call, please.
Ms. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Ramadan,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
I abstain on number 3, and yeah, my vote is yes. Finance and physical plan.
Move items 1 through 19 with the addendum. Mr. BA, would the new one be 13.20, not
Yeah,
19?
13.20 is the newest one.
So be move items 1 through 20.
Second.
Okay. Moved by Mr. Ramadan, second by Mr. Jacquez. I do have a question.
It was not Jack, was Mr. Martinez. Oh, it was Jack,
Jacquez.
sorry.
The school uniform vendor, Flynn and O'Hara. Is that the only vendor that we have? I thought we had another one. I know I had brought this up years ago where I want to make sure parents. I think this place is far or something. When parents have options or correct.
You're muted, Doc.
Yes, we do. We had two vendors last year. One had a fire,
Correct.
so they're not in business this year. But I believe they're going to rebuild and
Understood.
start back up soon, at sometime in the future.
And
Currently, we just have Flynn and O'Hara.
understood. Thank you, Dr. Hernandez. And Mr. Walker, this year, just for the record, we're are I guess for the foreseeable future. I'm not sure what the policy calls for, but the students are not going to be required to wear a uniform.
That's
Correct.
correct. So until we get back to traditional normal operations with every single person in the building that's supposed to be there, if we end up going with a hybrid, and at some point in the year, we know we're most likely going to have to go to a hybrid at some point, that we're going to ask the kids that come either wear a white shirt, a black shirt, or a red shirt, so that we can kind of easily identify them upon entry and exit. But we want kids to be able to wash their clothes daily. And we know that not everybody might have a washer and dryer readily available, so we think it's the right way to go.
Well, if they do have their uniforms, they can still wear it as well,
Very
right?
good. Yes, it's a great question. If the student still has a uniform and wishes to wear it, of course it's fine. But we're not going to be requiring it for the kids that do come in.
Just want to make sure that they have that option.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And roll call, please.
Ms. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Ramadan,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes, I'm going to abstain on number 5.
Okay.
Vote is yes. Um, any new or old business? I do have old business that I just want to put on the record. Um, as part of the superintendent search, as part of the superintendent's contract, if we couldn't come to a consensus with Manchester, we had to do a mediation meeting with the county superintendent. I was on a meeting last week with Mrs. Fisher as in her capacity as the board president of the Manchester Regional High School Board of Education, and also Mrs. Fusco, the vice president of the Manchester Regional High School Board of Education. And we did speak to the county superintendent's office, and unfortunately, we couldn't come to any consensus. But I just wanted to share that with the public and the rest of the board. And does anyone else have any new or old business? Okay. I just want to put on record on behalf of the board that We still want to continue a great relationship with the Manchester Regional High School Board of Education. The fact that we couldn't reach consensus on the superintendent is not is not it's not going to dictate our relationship. We still want to maintain a great educational relationship for the benefit of our children. And also, I don't want to speak on behalf of Manchester, but I do want to say that this is in no way, shape, or form a reflection on Mr. Waka on Manchester's point. It's just unfortunate that both boards just couldn't see eye to eye. It's nothing personal. And just because we couldn't agree on a superintendent, we still agree on a bunch of other things, such as the shared um, um, special education director, such as shared custodial services, our shared business administrator. So we want to continue our relationship with the Manchester Regional High School Board of Education, and we just want to put that on record.
Question. Being that this has been ruled out or a consensus that we couldn't agree, do they still have the possibility of reorganizing the strategy if they wanted Mr. Walcott to be still part of their superintendent?
We will have to consider that with our
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
principals.
Manchester are if they ever want to consider hiring our superintendent, the door is always open. We could definitely discuss it. The option is always on the table. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Moving on, do we have a motion to open up the public portion to hear citizens who wish to address the Board of Education?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Martinez, second by Mrs. Perez, and roll call.
Ms. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez. You say yes? Okay. Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Ramadan,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. At this time, the floor is open to anyone in the public who wishes to address the Board of Education. Do you see anything, Mr. Pagani? I don't have anything on my end.
Not at this time, Mr. Guzman.
Okay, we'll give it a minute or so.
George,
Yes, ma'am.
what are we doing?
I'm just waiting, just giving it a minute to see if anyone wishes to address the board. Mr. Pagani, you still see no one?
I have not received anything in the chat, Mr. Guzman.
Okay. Do we have a motion to close?
Motion to close.
Second.
Closed, moved by Mrs.
Mrs.
Fisher,
Fisher.
second by Mr. Ramadan, and roll call, please.
Ms. Diaz, Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez, Mr.
Yes.
Martinez,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Ramadan,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Do we have a motion to go into executive session to discuss the COVID-19 restart plan, in addition to uh, personnel with respect to what the Health and Education Association brought to our attention? Action may be taken, and I anticipate. How long do we think?
I don't know.
Maybe, yeah, I know it's
Uh,
unpredictable, but I don't want to leave the public waiting. I want to at least give them some time. Uh, at least 10, 15 minutes. If it takes longer, we'll let Mr. Pagani know, who in turn will send out a chat. Do we have a motion to go into executive?
Anyone making that motion?
So moved.
Okay.
Oh, second.
Moved by Mrs. Diaz, second by Ms. Perez. Roll call, please.
Miss Diaz, Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Ramadan,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Okay, I will start with this. I will start with on the security and safety 11.1, which is to approve the 2020 emergency site evacuation. We got clarification on that, and we're going to take a vote to approve that evacuation site, that agreement. So, do we have a motion to approve that agreement? 11.1 on the security and safety.
Anybody want to move it?
Oh, I'll
So
move it.
moved.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Caesar, second by Mr. Jacquez, and roll call.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Ramadan,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Okay, moving on to 11.2, which is the approval for the restart plan phase one. After a very lengthy discussion in executive session, taking into consideration all the information we have available to us, in addition to what the Health and Education Association presented to us tonight, after discussing executive session, we've decided to take a formal vote on this. It's merely not merely, but it is it's a plan, and we're going to take a vote on this plan. And we're also going to call for a special meeting next Tuesday, and to in furtherance of of what we're going to do as it pertains to moving on with the school year. At this time, I would like to take that time to uh, see where all our board members stand, because if you look around, we're missing three board members. And in addition, I want the COVID-19 Board of Education committee to meet another time. So at this time, I will entertain a motion to approve our hybrid plan.
Motion. Motion to move.
Moved by Mr.
Or what?
Martinez. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Izzo. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Fisher,
No.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Ramadan,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes.
All right.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
And roll call.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Ramadan,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Dr. Hernandez, congratulations on your.
Mhm.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Mhm.